like it's settled down. So, hello and welcome everyone to another employment-focused webinar brought to you by Outcome.Life and the good folk at Study Melbourne. My name's Dom. I'll be your host today, and we're going to look into what I feel is probably the second most important issue facing students graduating. The first, of course, is getting your first job. The second is that there are these things called jobs of the future, which is going to determine what we're doing in the future. So why is this so important? Well, for starters, sadly, most of you are studying courses that are currently not going to provide you with the skills for these jobs of the future. And extra learnings outside of your formal studies, I think, will be required for graduates if they do wish to access these exciting jobs in the future. In fact, in a recent report commissioned by Deakin University and Ford Motor Company titled 100 Jobs of the Future, an amazing 53% of the top 100 jobs of the future don't exist today. 53%. And although this may sound scary, this is not the first time that technology and innovation and just things that happen around us change the employment landscape. You only need to look back to the recent pandemic to show how there's dozens of jobs that have been created that didn't exist before. Things like COVID-19 testers, caregivers, givers, contact tracers using big data, temperature screeners, bylaw enforcement officers, and also other industries such as face mask makers, screen manufacturers, as everyone is at home with extra screens. And of course, the big one, and you'll see that this is our lovely production person, Enya, Zoom support specialists, because now Zoom production of meetings is a big thing. So hence, I see innovation and change and creating a lot of these jobs of the future. It's an incredible opportunity for graduates. And I think you need to be aware of them in order to secure them. So what we're going to do today, we've got three exciting guests that you will see on your screen. First of all, Cameron, who's got the headphones on. Cameron, the founder of thingc, Robotics, a business creating autonomous robots to help solve the shortage of labour issues faced by our farmers. We also have Vishek, Batra, engineer, entrepreneur and innovator in sustainable packaging. And we also have a good friend of mine, Adam Crow, hardware and software engineer, entrepreneur and inventor. And, welcome, gentlemen. It should be a lot of fun. So, Cameron, let's start with you. I told you were going to go last, but I'm going to actually make you go first. So
make me go first. Like sticking it on me.
I suppose there's no bigger industry at the moment that needs to embrace technology more than farming and horticulture. And one of the things that's really affected them lately is that without the backpackers and international students that have come into the country, there's a lot of places that simply can't harvest their fruit. And it appears as though a lot of it is all going to just go to waste. But Cameron, tell us about what you're doing, because I think the students are going to find it very interesting, and what you see happening in the areas that you're involved in the future.
Sure, thanks, Dom. Look, pleasure to be here and to share my experience. So as Dom illustrated, I've been running a startup called thingc Robotics, and we're focusing on automation of field robotics. So essentially building machines that are autonomous for the farm to do functions in the farm that otherwise you would have somebody sitting on a tractor or manually doing work in the field. And this has been a big issue for farmers even well before COVID. If I talk to a farmer in the last couple of years, I've been doing this for 3 years now, and every farmer I've talked to has said labour is their number one challenge. And of course, COVID has made that even more so because in Australia, we really rely on a lot of international imports to do the jobs that, frankly, most Australians don't want to do. And that's been the challenge for farmers. It's regional work. It's very difficult and tough work to be out in the field all day. So a lot of people just don't want to do that manual labour. And that's where opportunities like robotics and automation have really, in the last few years, become quite possible. It's not exactly new technology. Automation and AI are many decades old, but the cost point has got to a point where it's actually starting to become viable for us to offer this as a service and to develop products for that. So That's an area that we've been actively working in, and it really does highlight these jobs of the future paradigm where 10 years ago people wouldn't have been dreaming of robots in farms. It's something that we've had to rethink, how do we support that? What sort of people, what sort of skills would we need to do? So we're definitely moving further away from manual labor and much more towards a highly skilled labor that, it may not be locational, a technician, for example, a mechanic for a robot might be a future job. As we build robots and we deploy them in the field, somebody has to maintain them, and you might be quite a mobile position where there's lots of machines to attend to over the vast country that we farm. But that said, farming itself is changing too. You look at different food systems and people doing more like moving towards different proteins, such as your crickets and grasshoppers and these sorts of things becoming more mainstream foods. And not even, yes, that's becoming food for human, but amazingly, a lot of the food we produce is actually food for animals, not necessarily food that we eat directly. So a lot of these things, people might turn their nose up at eating crickets, but a lot of that protein is actually going into fish feed, is going into animal, is actually what then supports the food for humans. So there's these industries popping up which we couldn't have really dreamed of, even a decade ago. So it just shows how things are so dynamic in terms of the workforce and how things are changing. And I guess that's the key thing. If you read through the 100 Jobs of the Future report, the key thing is it's about change. Anyone entering the workforce now is unlikely to be doing the same career for their whole job. There's going to be that old concept of you get a job for life is far, far gone. And that's just the reality. There are people who once upon a time got a job, worked for the same company for 40 years. That's not happening anymore. And people will have to learn different skills. So I think that's the key thing. And being adaptable. It's not just technology skills, but technology is certainly becoming part of almost every job these days. So it's quite interesting to look through that list of different jobs, and I guess I've sort of set myself up in terms of how I got to this point, uh, through a very varied background. So, starting out as a motor mechanic, studying engineering and industrial design, ended up going into architecture and web development. So, I've had a few careers in my own time and run a few businesses along the way. And about 6, 7 years ago, I started a makerspace, which is essentially a community workshop. And that's what really got me back into the hardcore technology space and led me into the business I'm in now. But alongside that, I've actually run a co-working space for hardware startups. So you'll see lots of co-working spaces around, but not many of them actually offer you the opportunity to have a workshop and an office alongside each other. And so that's where I've really specialized in terms of being able to support others who have the same situation as me that need a bit of space. So we've got some really interesting people in our space, which is in Brunswick East. We've got a company who are doing concrete products using robotic technologies to create molds that are flexible and can change. We've got a company doing underwater robotics alongside my agriculture robotics. We've got an electronics engineer who works very regularly with startups. We even have a distillery who are working on non-alcoholic gin. So all these things are reflective of the future. The gin still has to be made somewhere. So these guys have built their own stills. They've done all the hard work. So it's still a hardware company at heart. But you see, like that's consumer preference is changing. People want non-alcoholic beverages. So they're really trying to accommodate for that change. And I guess like the ultimate thing is change. You have to really prepare yourself for change.
Wow, Cameron, a lot in there, and I visited your facility out there, and it's amazing. I think a lot of students think of themselves that if they're engineers, they've got to go to an engineering firm. That's not the case. You can go to a gin manufacturer, you can go to a concrete molding design factory. You can, and Vishek will tell us more about his sustainability work that he's doing. You can often combine what you've learnt and also what your passions are. Like a lot of people in Australia don't realise that the horse industry in Australia is our third biggest employer. And we get a lot of students that come out of South America who, for whatever reason, love horses. And they need project managers, they need engineers, they need designers, they need accountants, they need all of these people. And so hence, you can combine what you've learned and also put it into an area that's your passion.
Well, that's really interesting thing that you say there, Dom, because I had a note exactly about that. And I say, right now, you should not be studying to get a job. Absolute last thing you should be doing. You should be figuring out your passions and improving your skills in that area so that you can become an expert in that area. Your study doesn't always have to be formal study. Formal study is great to get you to a point where you can differentiate yourself from other potential job seekers, but do everything you can to really prove what to really, I guess, follow your passion outside of your study hours. It's not just get a degree, get a job anymore. We as employers, we're looking for people who have followed their passions, who spend all their waking hours tinkering with the things that we're trying to work on. The people I work with are software engineers who love robotics. They're people who are really hardcore into this, and they spend their spare time for fun working in robotics. That's the sort of person I want in my organization.
Yeah, and Cameron, you've taken on a few interns lately and given them some incredible hands-on training, and a couple of them were left a bit wanting with their skills that they didn't have, and mainly in that AutoCAD area. Can you let people know out there that some of the things that if you're going to take on an intern, what are some of the things that are absolute musts for them to hit the ground running when they come and do some work for you?
For sure. I think in this day and age, if you're in the engineering space, you have to be very proficient in 3D CAD. It doesn't have to be a particular package because most of them are close enough that you could probably pick up whatever the company is working with pretty quickly. But if you're looking to target a particular company, find out what software they're using and get yourself a little bit of experience. Most software you can get free trial licenses and you can spend a month just tinkering away at it and getting experience, because what we need is people who are very competent in 3D modeling, competent in 3D printing and additive technologies. There's a lot of these things that are relatively accessible now. It's easy enough to get hold of a 3D printer or find somewhere you can use one. If you learn the nuances of how to design for that, that really gives you a head start. So absolutely, 3D CAD is a critical thing for engineering. 3D modeling experience, 3D printing, all of those sort of advanced manufacturing, because that's interesting too. Again, looking at that report, the report was released in 2019.
Yes.
Obviously, didn't predict the global issues we had last year. And one of the big things they said, the world was about globalization. And 2 years ago, you would have said that. But these days, I think a lot of it is actually coming back in house. And I guess, we're through automation. It doesn't really matter if we've got machines producing things. It doesn't matter if they're in China or if they're in Australia. The cost of operation is basically the same because it's not huge human labor content. So we need people who are skilled in manufacturing. We need people who can operate these advanced machines. We envisage the future where our machines will be built locally. It'll be a 3D design file that we can ship to any part of the world. It will be built and assembled locally. It'll be supported locally. So, though globalization is, of course, a thing, I think you need to also look very closely at your local environment and see that people are going to be, especially for the next few years, very cautious about moving around the globe to the extent that they were. And I think there's opportunities in that for people who want to have those skills that they might have thought otherwise were only available offshore.
And Cameron, also too, with the work that you're doing, it's interesting that you've got your robot operating in Echuca, which is on the Murray River, and so regional Victoria. And we've had a chat with Colette last time we met. How there's so many opportunities in regional Victoria, which is really good for those students who are looking to immigrate here to Australia. There's so many opportunities out there, and so these jobs of the future are also in other places, not just in the urban cities.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I come from the country myself, and I imagine a lot of our future manufacturing will happen in the country. There's no reason people can't live out in the countryside and actually have these advanced manufacturing jobs. And to me, when you look at the cost of rent, the improved lifestyle, the city isn't the be all and end all, and it's quite, especially for us in agriculture, to be just centrally located doesn't make a lot of sense. So ultimately, our goal is to have local manufacturing happening around the country so that we can have local support. So, and I think COVID's actually helped in that sense and made a lot of employers realize that, hey, there's nothing wrong with having remote workers. Many of us have done it for years, but it was always a challenge to get people to accept that as a norm. Now it's become the new norm, and I don't think that'll change dramatically. I think you'll see a lot of your opportunities are actually remote working, but it brings challenges. It's discipline. You have to be able to sit there and actually focus on your work and not be distracted. So it's very challenging and different environment to sitting in a workplace where you kind of got no choice but to sit down and work. When you're at home, it's a little bit more challenging. So I think for students at this day and age, really building up that discipline to focus on what they're focusing on for their period of work. And flexibility is great. Abilities to be able to stop and start work and do other things around it. But I can assure you, everybody can see through when people are putting an effort in and when they're not. So the fact that you're hidden behind a screen and people can't physically see you doesn't make a difference. The work output you put in, the work ethic you have is very, very obvious to people on the other side of the screen. So as a future worker, I think you just have to learn that discipline and learn how to show that you're actually putting in the effort that's expected of you. And it is challenging. I've worked from home for many years myself, and you have to just really focus on that. So it's a new paradigm. It's something you have to learn that you might not have otherwise done if it was for us just having the traditional way of going into the office and working with colleagues. It's definitely a different environment.
Yeah, and so it requires a new type of thinking. And when I think about your robot too, and Adam, you would talk about this a lot, and I know we're going to talk about this. Your robot, because it's autonomous, this whole thing of work having to be done between 9 and 5 is a thing of the past. Like your robot will leave the shed at 2 a.m. in pitch black and will go out and do its spraying and do its mowing and do whatever it needs to do. And then even when it needs a charge or when it needs to fill itself up with more spray or whatever, it will just go back to home base and replenish itself and then go back again, which means that now the whole workplace, the jobs that we're doing in the future, we're absolutely turning it on its head. And it's so exciting. And we really want for all our students and graduates to be able to access these. But if I can ask you one last thing, Cameron, before we move on to Vishek, is that, how do you keep yourself up to date with what's happening and what's new? Like, where do you go to get your information?
I think it's more where do you go to avoid information, Dom? Yeah.
There's too much of it.
There's way too much of it. And I think that's actually part of, being able to manage yourself and being able to manage how you operate in a digital world is actually another skill that's very, very important. It's very easy to be distracted by all these things that are around us. So I would say it's the opposite factor.
Okay.
I personally intentionally don't get involved in social media anymore. I don't do anything that has real distractions. I other than my business phone, I turn it off when I'm not at home, not at work. So I find that distractions are a thing that's very easy. And when I need to focus on a particular thing, I make that a real point of turning things off and saying, look, this is my time to focus on this. So, there's so many news sources out there. You can find news on any topic you can possibly imagine. So definitely it's useful to get involved in some of those, but I think it's also a discipline to actually, actively take it in when you need to and when it's right for you, rather than just having things ping, 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 ping that constantly distract you. I think distraction is actually one of the biggest challenges of the future workforce.
Wow. Yeah, excellent. No, that's great. All right. Well, thanks, Cameron. Vishek, let's have a chat with what you're doing at the moment, and sustainability obviously is a massive issue in the world at the moment. So tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, so I joined this startup called Silfresh. So we are focusing on producing reusable packaging for businesses and customers. And initially we started with silicon. Now we are looking into different other products, materials which are more sustainable. And this led to another discussion within the company where we okay, we are producing some prototypes for different companies, different clients. We want to build this sustainability habit in the core of the company. So how we could do that? So finding right sustainable materials, even if it's like a plastic product, trying to reduce single-use plastic within the company. So encouraging employees, why don't you have a reusable cup? And when we create our prototypes, we focus on finding materials which we can keep reusing again and again. So one of our latest prototype, what we did is we did 3D printing, and we used recycled plastic to produce the prototype for the client. And then from there, we made some silicon products. And then any silicon product we have made, we're trying to collect and then do some experiments, test it out, how we can keep reusing silicon again and again. So it was one of our like core pillars where we like, we need to like think more about the environment rather than, just keep producing some virgin material products. Even the initial products are made virgin, but at the end of its life cycle, we don't want it to be end up in landfill or in ocean or waterways. We want them to be bring it back to us. We want to create some meaningful products for you from that perspective, which is something that we are doing right now. We are doing some research and development in terms of sustainability, and also on the side note, I'm working to develop some processes to produce recycled 3D filaments. I know a lot of people are building them. There's not much success in the world out there. There has been some quality issues, contamination issues. So my job is to tackle all these issues and come up on top and be like, yes, we have a solution out here. And the best possible way is like, there's a lot of things available open source right now, and you don't need to have such a niche experience. Sometimes you can just go online because you want to do smart work, you don't want to do hard work. So if anybody has done something, you want to learn from the mistakes rather than you doing the same mistake again and starting from the zero. You want to start somewhere which is already there and try to improve the whole process. So that is one thing. So we do all the additive manufacturing. There is some mechatronics involved, some robo mechanics involved, where we have to, if our machine breaks down, how we could fix it rather than buying virgin material parts. So one thing we did was we rescued some e-waste and we resource recovered a couple of like wires, some metal, and we used all these extra material which were gonna end up in the landfill. We rescued all of it, fabricated, create new parts for our own machines. So that way, trying to foster this kind of thinking in our employees and future employees who might want to join our company and support the cause. And at the same time, I'm running parallelly another cooperative where we are focusing on reducing single-use plastic and trying to reuse the plastic economy and create a new plastics economy. I think Ellen MacArthur Foundation, they have signed and created a new agreement worldwide where all the plastic manufacturers come together and try to find a new solution for all the plastic, because we all know that plastic is not going anywhere. Like, it exists in the environment for hundreds of years, even if it's single use, even if it's reusable. So we need to find innovative ways where it doesn't end up in landfill or in ocean waste. It just comes back to its source, and all these people can just actually create new beautiful products and put some more impact in the environment.
Yep. And it's why I got you on here today, Vishek, because I think that, a little bit like Cameron and also Adam when he'll speak shortly, is that when I ask you guys to talk about yourselves, you instantly talk about your passion. You don't actually say that I'm an engineer or that I'm whatever it is that you study. It's the passion, and you can feel it. And this is the thing I want to get across to all the students. Remember that in Vishek's business and also Cameron's business, he needs everyone. As I say, engineers, he needs designers, he needs software people, they need all this stuff. But one thing, if we can impress upon you, is that follow your passion, because then you'll end up speaking just like Vishek.
100%. I totally agree with you and the Cameron as well. Like, you need to have passion. Like, if you don't have passion and you're just working, like, you're not going to produce good quality results. Like, you might produce good results, but like, it might not be that satisfactory. Like, we had a couple of interns where it's like, they're really good at designing, they're really good at doing simulation work, building, but they lack the passion. And when you're trying to make them understand the whole story behind the cause, is just very difficult. So even it doesn't matter which industry you're working in, like you need to find your passion, like materials, because being a mechanical engineer and from the manufacturing background is just like, because there's plenty of materials out there, there's hundreds and thousands of materials, and it's very difficult and challenging to know every single material, but you can always find one material that you're really interested in. So I found that yes, silicon is really cool and it's flexible. It's it has so many applications. You can stretch it, you can produce whatever you want, you can just go and play with it. It's like a clay, and it's derived from silica. And then it's like, yes, you can, there's so many things you can actually produce, like people might have not found this potential yet. And then making sure that they are reusable on top, which is another challenge. So it just brings a whole lot of new learning experience for all these students, or for myself as well. So yeah.
Cool. And also, I was chatting the other day with the president of the Waste Management Association of Australia, and he was saying to me how they really have to compete hard to get good talent. Now, to me, some advice for students: if you are really keen to get into this sustainability area, check out their website, join their association. They've got a lot of members all around Australia, and it's a good place for you to start hunting for those jobs of the future. But you had a look through that report on the jobs of the future.
Yeah.
Were there any jobs that stuck out to you as being quite interesting that students might want to have a look at?
Yeah, of course. Like the top three jobs that I found like that attracted my attention were like additive manufacturing engineer, which is basically 3D printing is one side using FDM technologies, and then other aspect in additive manufacturing technologies, knowing the CNC side of the machines, because essentially it's just a normal CNC machine and it's keep injecting plastic or any material you can imagine in the world and do that. And having that knowledge of, how the actually machine works and how you can do it layer by layer, because it's such a detailed process. Having that knowledge in the background is really important, and able to simulate that whole environment within your computer is another important thing here. And after that, I was looking at mechatronics engineer, and mechatronics is just, they're like on above mechanical. They have knowledge of electronics, computers, IT, and full mechanical, and they know how computers work, how machines work, and how programs work. So that person can actually go out there, and doesn't have to be within a company, like having little bit knowledge of every software, how they work, and how you can actually get around, and you can use one program for yourself to do something good for another company and for yourself also. Another example was like on open source, you have so many codes available. You can just pick one code for yourself which you feel comfortable, and then you can start playing around with it, and who knows, you might come up with something interesting that other person might not have. And again, it's like if the machine breaks down, a lot of people buy these printers and everything, but at the end, if you can't maintain them, then that creates another issue, because then you don't know, you bought a printer but you don't know how to fix it. So it creates another headache where you might have to run around, find somebody who could fix it for you, rather than you fixing and create a learning experience for yourself. And again, it's just passion that just speaks for itself, where you're really keen that how actually these things work, and how I could improve all these things and make them more efficient. And on top of that is the sustainability, like, okay, I have this virgin material, if I have find a way to recycle these, how can I do it?
Yeah.
So material knowledge of materials, machines, and IT, little bit of IT, like all these tech savvy things is like really important. And I feel like in future these things matters a lot, and everybody has to know how these things work, especially in like computer knowledge, because everything is digitalized now, and because of COVID, people are working from home. You must be able to diagnose remotely, so that plays a really important role here. And robot mechanics was another field I found that, yeah, maybe, in long run, a lot of production line is all automated. Even if you're not in the assembly line, then if you can just have a remote access and then you just go there instead of going there, and you can just sitting at your home and you can fix the robot. How cool is that? And yeah, and also I feel like joining some associations like robot associations or Engineers Australia and other, like budding associations where you can actually meet these like-minded people. Because I feel like in my experience that meeting these people play a really important role, because then it just, drives your mind and like, yes, this is the passion. I like talking to these people. It just switches you on straight away. You're like, yes, this drives me and I like it. I like this knowledge feeding into my brain. And then again, passion. Like passion is really important here.
And also, and we talk about this all the time, that employers actually go to many of these meetups, and they generally, meet once a month. You don't have to go to all of them during a year. But if you go there and you show you're interested in the topic that's being discussed, many employers, they're going there to find staff. I cannot tell you the number of international students without PR that have gone to these meetups and have met someone, Look out for the old people, say like Adam and I, not so much Cameron and Vishek, but sorry, Adam. But look out for us and talk to us, because if you can show us your passion, the likelihood of us offering you a job is incredibly high. And don't worry, all companies, especially now that we're coming out of COVID, everyone is understaffed and they're looking to put people on. And if you go to these meetups and chat with people and show that you've got an interest in this area, you're not one of 1,000 applications that have just been received from Seek. That's the interview right then and there. And you'll be surprised at how many people can get jobs out of, these simple meetings.
Exactly. Like another thing was like, I used to do a lot of hackathons because that is just like a sprint. You're like challenging yourself. Is like, okay, in 3 days, can I come up with this solution? Okay, in 1 day, can I find this solution? You're just challenging yourself in the area that you want to actually work in. If that's not the right hackathon for you, you can always go to another one. And there's plenty of companies, who do all these small sprints. You just have to look out for maybe on Seek or on LinkedIn, and maybe connect with university as an alumni, and then keep interacting with all these university lecturers. Like what I did was at RMIT, I used to go to RMIT Activator all the time, and every week they have some workshops going on, and every week I used to meet new people and then, share my thoughts, chat with them. It's like, hey, I'm doing this something really cool here. Do you want to like hear about my story? And then that's the way I started and met all these other entrepreneurs, and they're doing really well what they're passionate about. And then that's how I like got absorbed into this industry.
Yeah, well, on the weekend I caught up with a HR director. Her name was Batra, and she is the HR director of the biggest employer of consulting psychologists in Australia. They employ 1,800 of these people. And she was saying that, behavioural interviewing is really important, and most students have learned about behavioural interviewing. But I can tell you now that in a behavioural interview to talk about what you've done during a hackathon, there is no better answer, because you've volunteered to go there. Covers the volunteering thing. You've had to work to a very specific project, and you've had to work under pressure, and you had to work as teams. A lot of students, and rightfully so, complain that, you can't get experience until you get a job, but you can't get a job unless you got an experience. Hackathons is fantastic experience, especially for young people, and certainly does show that you're committed to go out there and make things happen. And so, thoroughly recommend that students participate in hackathons and things like that.
Yeah.
And Vivek, we got involved in a little project recently because with your association with, what's it called again? Something plastics?
It's called Rethink Recycling. So it's a small cooperative. Like we started this cooperative last year, and then now we have at least 22 members right now. So it's not even a year now, like we got 22 members. So we have some data association, and then there is Lotus Energy. There's a couple of really good charities and other corporate companies who have partnered with us as a co-op. And then it's just like a community, like where we want to bring all these businesses together and, find a solution to this growing problem.
And yeah, and you were looking at actually providing people with the plans and instructions on how people can build their own shredders and build their own extruders.
Exactly.
And those type of things.
Like we got all these blueprints where it's like if you don't want to build the machines, like you can come help us to just fabricate one, because every week we are like either building a new machine, either we're testing the machine, and it's always something going on. And a lot of people have volunteered with us. It's like, hey, I want to help you build your website. And another week there was another person, and he's like, I want to volunteer with you because what you're doing is really passionate and I really enjoy doing it. And it's like, of course, you're more than welcome to join. Like, this is the whole part where you want to bring like-minded people together and, find a solution in sustainability and create something just close the loop. And sustainability is, I feel like, is one aspect, but, having a whole system where you can just keep going around and around just in a closed loop, that is really important. And that's where I think in future, it's really important to have that sort of thinking and having those problem solving abilities, like actually play a really important role.
Yeah. And so and a question from Lavesh, 28 years old, working in a warehouse, I want to change my career. This is how you do it. And volunteering, joining groups, going to meetups, showing people what you're passionate about. And as employers, and I keep saying this, but no one believes me, no one cares what university you go to. No one cares what marks you got. Well, Adam won't say that, but I agree with that. But really, the most important thing is about what you know and what value you can bring. And so, show that you're passionate about things.
Yeah. Out of the box, just get out of your box. Like, if you don't put yourself out there, then it's like you're not doing good enough.
So Vishek, if you can do us a favour, perhaps put a couple of links to websites, the Precious Plastics one, where people can perhaps have a look at.
Yeah, what I can do is I can put my website link for my cooperative. So if it's still, the website is still under construction, what I can do is I can post my Facebook and Instagram that you can follow.
Yep, and maybe too, if you're comfortable, paste your LinkedIn address in there as well. So last but not least, Adam, who's been a dear friend of mine for many, many years now, and a serial entrepreneur, has invented some amazing stuff. All the Indy cars in the US run on his timing system. He co-invented the world's first commercial VoIP system for Malcolm Turnbull, our former Prime Minister, and continues to invent and create terrific things. Adam, welcome. Tell us about, what you think about jobs of the future.
I think jobs of the future, there's going to be a massive spectrum. At the moment, the jobs of the future are always going to be tied to the economic, philosophical times. Okay, as inequality grows, you're going to get jobs of the future where people have to deliver email personally, manually. That's how bad things may get. But at the other end of the spectrum, you're going to get the 1%ers who are going to have incredibly lavish jobs where they just swan around and be perhaps social media influencers. Okay, these are jobs we look back and say, well, how on earth can you get paid for just being a celebrity? Right? We're going to see some absurd jobs appear. So, but we don't want to talk to those people. We want to talk to those who want to actually do something for humanity. And for us three engineers here, engineering wasn't a passion. All right, we overuse the word passion. I'm just going to be different here, and that is passion is very emotional. I don't want emotional people because they have downers too. They can get into all sorts of weird things. What I really wanted, and I think we're talking about the same thing here, is directed curiosity. We get an intense satisfaction out of understanding the world around us. And that's what drives us to do things. Okay. We don't just read stuff. We have to understand how things work. And this is where the hands-on thing comes about. If you want to get jobs of the future, you've got to start getting your hands dirty right now with the tools and the materials that are out there now. Any one of us can get on YouTube and learn how to extract gold from circuit boards. That's fascinating. Learn how we can recycle stuff. Learn just how bad plastics out in the environment can be, right? Learn what AI can do and what it can't do. I still understand a lot of people out there think AI is much better than it is, all right? It's patchy, a bit like the mathematics. I would advise everyone out there who's planning for the future, and we all should do that, is to start playing with stuff now. It may not seem like it's a serious thing, but just, buy stuff and start glimpsing the future, right? It's not until you start playing with stuff that all of a sudden, whoa, I never believed that was possible, all right? So it may sound weird, putting on a VR headset now, but in 2 years' time, it may well be what we're all doing remotely because it allows us to do a telepresence, all right? The technology is just going to get smaller and lighter. We'll be just wearing glasses with augmented reality, right? There's going to be some misses like Google Glass was, but it's going to get there, right? We have to play with this stuff. 3D makers, right? Print some 3D stuff out. Go to a friend's place. Print it out. Understand what it can do right now. You've got to start imagining what you can do. We want more polymaths. Okay. Not many people get called that. And I don't understand why we're not all trying to be polymaths and understand a wide variety of disciplines, because more options you have, in terms of your capability and abilities, the more job opportunities, that will also come your way, right? Ask questions. I know lots of passionate people who talk a lot about stuff, can't do anything. They don't do anything because I think, as Cameron mentioned, there's distractions galore, and we can fool ourselves into thinking that we're learning a lot by just reading Reddit or Hacker News. All right. I fully support what Vishek said too about Engineers Australia, Institute of Engineers, IEEE. These are organisations that every single person who wants to get a job in the future should join now, not complain about what are they doing for me. They're not your mother. Use them as resources. Use them to help market yourself and learn to do stuff. I'm surprised people do personal trainers to get them to do stuff they don't want to have to do. They get tired. I don't want to go on. Yes, you can, right? Where are the personal trainers for your brain? Where are the people who say, you've got to learn, you've got to overcome this particular lack of study. You are weak when it comes to, say, critical thinking, or you're weak, your knowledge in this particular area. How many people seem to know much about material engineering? Yet it's all around us because no one can be bothered. It doesn't interest them. But I guarantee you, everyone who studied these subjects, thermodynamics, it's after you've done the hard yards, you think, that was worth it. I now understand the world a lot more. And that's where it came back to it. Again, Cameron said, the education. You shouldn't ever go to a university to try to skill up for a job. If you want to skill up, do an online YouTube course or something. And employers don't want people who want skills. I don't want to see people, you should never market yourself as having, say, a certificate in one narrow type of technology, usually just some tool. So as an example, if you've got a certificate in, say, Microsoft, IT or something, well, that sends me the wrong message. I want to see people who are around it, because you're just going to tell me that there's a Microsoft solution to every single problem you encounter. Right? So the jobs of the future, you've got to be more open-minded. You've got to not lock yourself down into pre-prepared solutions. All right. there's going to be a lot more exploitation of workers in the future, a lot more. And some of us employers are going to do it without even realizing that we're exploiting you, right? I want to see jobs that have ethics a lot more front and center. The IEEE Code of Ethics is a wonderful thing for every aspiring developer and engineer to print out and put on their wall. All right. And the Code of Ethics isn't just for you. It's your workplace, right? We lead by example. So your teammates, your friends, you do the right thing and hopefully they'll follow you. So employers are looking for people who are open-minded, hands-on. Okay. You will fail at stuff. You'll toss away a lot of the toys that you use, but you understand a bit more about these things.
But they're good things to talk about, Adam, because often, especially when I know that when you recruit, you ask people to tell us about what you've done that failed, because that's really important. Because if you're not pushing the boundaries enough, if you succeed at everything.
Right. I also ask that students always aspire, especially when you're younger and have got a bit more energy, aspire to do tough stuff. Don't just go lazy, throw away your education and just do, web forms. Here's another web form. Great, we need that. Here's another menu delivery app. Yeah, the world needs that. If you've got an education, fix world hunger. Fix the things like agriculture, for example. And I'm sure Cameron's in the box seat here. I don't want to see farms, and I'm from country too, Cameron, Wimmera Valley. I don't want to see farms just use up all the land just to grow, food, okay, and then you're doing the hard work of trying to get autonomous vehicles try to work out how to work in a wild situation. Whereas we know that the future is going to probably be more controlled environmental settings where we set up vertical farms around populated centres, and the robots have then got a much more concentrated and more consistent manner of doing agriculture. And so farms, you'll make no money growing food, I'm hoping, and that the farm land becomes more accessible to people. We make more money perhaps off energy creation. We make more money off tourism, for want of a better word. Knock down the fences. If we don't have as many meat eaters, if we can produce meat in a factory, you're not going to make money with cattle. So why have fences? Okay, let's make the land enjoyable to live in. Let's do better water management. These are challenges that I want to see young people take on and try it, fail, before they just do the easy, boring stuff that anyone can pretty much do. So that's my rant.
Yeah, good. Great rant. Now, Adam, we talk a lot about automation, how if the last 10 years was about mobile and social, the next 10 years is about automation. What are your thoughts there?
Scaling. It's about scaling. We need to have a mindset. If you want a job in the future, think of scaling. I talked about the 1% of people who are going to do most of the work. That could be 0.1%. Okay. How do you as a person scale? Okay. And it's your time management. It's how you're studying to be efficient, but it's also automating your general processes. And that's going to be a big one. If you can code, just have a coding mindset that automates everything, you're going to get higher quality, repeatable quality, and obviously it's going to be faster. And the world is providing these services to you by clouds, by robots. Okay. And I love robots. I used to do some too. I love them, but I'm just, yeah.
And our workforce is changing too. And it is interesting that Cameron was saying that, before people used to travel, but now because we're all stuck because of this pandemic, and we've got to assume there's going to be more pandemics in the future, that working remotely is going to be really important, but also applying for jobs as a team. You've spoken about this before. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I also find it odd that when people apply for work, and by the way, it's the employer's side too. Why don't we say, I've got a job for a team, for a pair, and actually interview a team, two people who work closely and have had that experience working together, And in some cases, the sum is greater than the whole. Okay. So I'd like to see, I think there's going to be a lot more of that. And especially with remote working, you may find your work soulmate, perhaps in Cambodia or South America, and the two of you somehow may click and work together more efficiently. How do we find our work soulmates? Okay. There seems to be a lot of emphasis on creating e-harmonies and date things, but no one's actually trying to find people that you can work with, not necessarily in the same company, but people you can work with. Maybe the meetups can help, but it's a big wide world out there.
I've read a lot lately that corporations are going to be employing teams rather than individuals, and there's no better example than Pfizer, who I think it was a husband and wife team that developed the Pfizer vaccine. That's it. I really.
Yeah. So one last thing, we talked about the jobs for life, and we've seen that over the past 50 years. The jobs for life that our grandparents had seems to have gone, but at the same time, we're going to start seeing what we call fellowships, where that 1% are going to be grabbed for life with a company. There'll be legal contracts and everything. They'll be made like a fellow, and they can work on anything they want because those people are rare, and you don't want to let them go. A lot of those 1%ers actually run their own company for life. Okay. Well, many of those people may find it easier because we just want to have fun, really, and get paid for it. It's the bigger companies that are going to start doing that. Like tenure.
And just a reminder, everyone, if you do want to ask a question to any of our speakers today, please put it in the chat or in the questionnaire. I've been monitoring it. Adam, there's one thing that you talk about a lot, and that is swimming against the tide. Can you explain that concept?
Well, this is the old martial arts judo, isn't it? Where you try to let your opponent's power be used against them, and that. In other words, you have to just be smart. And if a whole industry is going in a certain direction, okay, you may find it more advantageous to also surf that. Okay. There's a lot of people who say, well, I'm going to continue working on Adobe because Flash will make a comeback. It happens a lot in our industry. We have to constantly look to see where the markets are heading. All right. If you're smart, you're able to actually identify opportunity. That's where the entrepreneurial bit comes in. But entrepreneurs don't have to be stupid about it. All right. An opportunity isn't just, oh, look, no one's doing this. There's probably good reason why people aren't doing it. All right. So we see a lot of stupid entrepreneurs out there. It happens. It happens all the time.
So the technologies that you're adopting, just have a look at where the world is going, and if the world is traveling, towards web, for example, don't get stuck in servers in your office. The world's going towards hosted services. So that's.
I will also point out that jobs of the future aren't necessarily always going to be completely new jobs, right? Just as people think of evolution, you get to humans and they say, well, why are there still monkeys? Well, the new jobs of the future, there's still going to be old jobs. And oddly enough, they may be left behind as everyone goes past them. So just be aware, there's always going to be jobs for people who focus on the old retro stuff. Okay. And they're massive opportunities. If you actually say, well, if everyone doesn't want to learn COBOL anymore, when all the COBOL programmers die, what are all those massive multinationals going to do? Who are they going to call? Hi, I'm 25. I know COBOL, and I've experimented.
And they get paid a fortune, Adam.
They'll get paid super fortune. Ada, can you believe Ada? Military. They pay it. Oh, sorry, Siri. They pay $1 billion or so for F-35 fighters, right? And that's primarily software. How many programmers do you think are going to be around in 40 years' time to still program those things?
And also Siri actually brings up a good point, Adam. I was actually at the biggest privately owned civil engineering company on Friday, having a chat to the CTO there. And believe it or not, he was saying that he wants every single one of his systems to be voice activated, and that he wants his systems to ask people questions at the appropriate time, but they're never ever to touch their equipment, their device, because whilst you're on a $3 million tractor that could kill people as well as carve up the land, they're not allowed to touch their devices. So that's what he's looking to do. So there's a lot of things out there that, such as, Siri and Google Assist and whatever the one for AWS is called, adapting that to current things that we are doing that poses incredible opportunities for people. And so this stuff's exciting as well.
It's all very exciting. We just want to hands-on and play with this stuff. Okay, again, control our passions, all right, because they actually make things worse in the end. Okay, so it's all about managing ourselves, managing our curiosity, managing other people's curiosity, driving them to optimal levels, because burnout's going to get worse and worse as that 1% get more and more asked of them. I used to think drawing cartoons as a kid was fantastic. I could do it all day until I actually started getting paid to do it. Then I realized I don't want to do this all day. And that was the burnout sometimes. I was passionate about cartooning, but reality was I wasn't. Emotion takes you only so far. Okay. Energy levels, go up and down. We all have to manage these things and help manage our friends and colleagues and that too. Jobs of the future are going to be a lot more interactive with each other, not just at that dumb work level, but there'll be a lot more personal efforts as we all realize we're all in this together.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for having a chat with us today. We've run out of time. As you could probably tell, I could talk about this all day. I absolutely love it. And I do, sincerely thank you guys for coming on and giving up your time and chatting about what you do and what you're passionate about. And so once again, big thank you to Study Melbourne, to all the international students. Study Melbourne is there for you. They do wonderful services. So if any of you or any of your friends are struggling, you got a legal issue, employment-related issue, even if you're having trouble just coping, and we know that, COVID has put a massive stress on everyone, the wonderful people at Study Melbourne are there. Give them a buzz, have a chat with them, look up their services on their website. Everything they do is free, okay? They're there for you. They're a terrific organisation. We also have, as part of Career Catalyst, a lot of other seminars and webinars that we run, all about employability. So please check that out. You'll see that Anya's put the link in there. Tomorrow, we actually have a wonderful webinar on how you can utilise LinkedIn to increase your employment opportunities. LinkedIn these days are far more important than actually your resume. Think of it, your resume sits on your hard drive, but your LinkedIn profile's out there 24/7 working for you. Get that working for you to get that wonderful first graduate role. So thank you, everyone. There is one, let's see if that question's coming up here. Thanks, guys, for that fantastic experience. Lewis, we love you. Thank you for saying that. That is wonderful. With Victorian Regional Agencies looking. Lewis, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll have a personal chat about that with you. There are so many people in regional Victoria that are looking for work, depending on what you do, whether you're an IT person or engineering or whatever. I'll actually give you some tailored advice as to where you can go and get some help. But there's lots and lots of people out there willing to help. So again, Vishek, Cameron, Adam, thank you so much. Thank you, Study Melbourne. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time, where I think we're talking about quite specific industries and what you can do to make yourself employable in those industries. So thanks, everyone. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye.